Who's your commander?
Good luck.
Equip.
Move to combat.
Resolves.
Now, before you attack
Does
me,
anyone have an answer?
well played.
Good game.
Hello everyone, DJ here, and this is the Jumbo Commander YouTube channel. I want to talk to you today about an exciting new commander from Zendikar Rising. We have a new commander that cares about the kicker mechanic. That's Verazol, the split current. That also sounds like a household cleaning spray or some sort of medication that advertises late at night. But Verazol actually is very cool because it really lets us access kicker cards that we didn't normally see in Commander. There's the rare exception of Rite of Replication and Everflowing Chalice, but for the most part, kicker cards just seem a little bit too vanilla for our format. Kavu Titan is an all-star in Limited, letting you play a 2-2 on turn 2, kick it later in the game to get a 5-5, it's strong. But in Commander, it just doesn't add up. We need something a little bit more impactful. Okay, we have Halar the Fire Fletcher. Halar deals damage to our opponents when we kick a spell, so he's like the payoff for playing kicker spells. I like Verazol a little bit better because it's the opposite. It makes all of our kicked spells better. But let's get into this commander. Verazol the Split Currents costs X blue-green and comes into play with a counter for each mana spent to cast him. That means that we can make him as big as we need at any point in the game. It also means that our commander tax doesn't go to waste. It just turns into more counters on Verazol. Verazol also says whenever we cast a kicked spell, we can remove 2 counters from Verazol to copy that spell. So we can copy any spell with kicker. This is great. It makes every vanilla kicker spell that might not be very impressive twice as impactful. So we're going to copy instant sorceries, even permanents. Copied creatures and artifacts create an additional token copy that also has any of those kicker bonuses. Verazol is going to be really flexible, letting us play him in the early game or late game, letting us play our kicker spells early game, or waiting until we can kick it and double those kicks up. Taking a look at all the blue and green cards with kicker, they also have the added benefit of being super low budget cards. All of this flexibility and all of these cards, our budget becomes super low, and we've made this deck for under $30. Amazing. Let's take a look at ramp and card draw, because that's at the core of any commander deck, and we have to see if the kicked versions of these cards are good enough to keep us in the game. Finally, we're going to look at some of these creatures and find out what it would mean to copy them, look at some of the +1/+1 counter themes and synergies that could go on in here, and then finally there are a few kicker cards that cost more than a quarter. And so we're going to look at those and find out ways that you can upgrade this deck to really take it to the next level. Let's go through some of the kicker spells that are great with Verazol, starting off with our ramp. Vine Gecko's a cute little all-star. He reduces those kicker costs, and that's basically ramp on turn 2. And then sometimes when we get into the late game, we can cast multiple kicker spells in a turn, making this little gecko really save us some mana. It also gets +1/+1 counters to turn into a big threat in the late game. Both Grow from the Ashes and Primal Growth can ramp us by 4 lands when we kick and copy them. Grow from the Ashes costs 5 mana kicked, and Primal Growth costs 3 mana and sacrificing a creature to kick. Both of these are solid ramp spells in their own right, and we can play them without copying them super easy. But Verazol really takes them over the top. That's what I really want to do, is just get so many lands onto the battlefield. When we can ramp so heavily, it means that we can stay in the late game and redeploy our Verazol and make bigger plays later on. Everflowing Chalice is already a commander staple, but it gets so much better with Verazol. Imagine we pay 2 into a Chalice and then copy it. We get 2 Chalices that tap for 1 mana. If we pay 4 and copy it, then we get 2 Chalices that tap for 2 mana each. That's such a better rate than Thran Dynamo. Next, we have a new card, Vastwood Surge. At its base, it's an explosive vegetation, but if we kick it for 8 mana and copy it, we'll ramp by 4 lands and put 4 +1/+1 counters on each creature we control. I love the flexibility of ramp spells being solid cards, but also having power in the late game. I also really like the idea of kicker cards putting +1/+1 counters back on our commander so that we can copy more spells in the future. Oh my gosh. Sentinel Woodreaders and the tongue twister that is Sphinx of Lost Truths are pretty underwhelming, but then when you kick them, they become really great. See, we really wouldn't pay 6 mana for a 1, 4, and 2 cards, but if we throw in our commander, we get 2 okay blockers, but 4 cards for 6 mana. That's a pretty good rate. Similar with Sphinx of Lost Truths. We get 7 mana, will get us 2 3/5 flyers and 6 cards when we copy it. I really like Blink of an Eye and Into the Royal when we can double it up. I mean, these aren't seeing a lot of play in normal Commander, but bouncing 2 permanents and drawing 2 cards is like super strong tempo play. Next, we have 2 cards from Zendikar Rising. Field Research is a divination at its base level, but when we kick it for 6 mana and copy it, we will get 6 cards. That's amazing rate and flexibility. Inscription of Insight is pretty expensive to kick at 8 mana, but it's worth it. When we copy it, we'll be able to bounce 4 creatures, draw 4 cards, create 2 very large creature tokens that are huge swings for us. We can catch up from behind. We can basically get back in the game from anywhere. It's amazing. Let's talk about some creatures. We get to look forward to doubling up powerful kicker creatures. The new Cragplate Behemoth turns into 2 hexproof and hasty 10/10s. It's a lot of mana, 10 mana when we copy it. But this is something that can come out of nowhere and just smash people. I'm actually a huge fan of this kicker powerhouse Myriad construct. It will come with tons of counters on it because we're always playing against people with non-basics. I think it's pretty safe to say that with 3 opponents, we can easily get 10 or 20 counters on it. And just imagine if we get 2 of them. Then the only thing that'll save them from these constructs bashing in is going to be a board wipe, because if they're ever targeted, we'll sacrifice it and it'll turn into a bunch of little constructs getting ready to swarm your opponents. I have a feeling that I'm going to really wish this was a hangerback walker so that when it just dies, I get the dudes, but I'm willing to try it out and I'm hoping that it's a really powerful effect that I like. The multi-kicker on Wolfbriar Elemental can get really out of hand. If we kick it once for just 5 mana and copy it, that's 2 4/4s and 2 2/2s. But that's just the baseline. If we kick it twice for 6 mana and copy it, we'll get 2 4/4s and 4 2/2s. Each time we kick it for just 1 extra green mana, we get 2 extra 2/2s. That's a crazy rate and a ton of power that we're putting onto the board with a single card. Now let's talk about some older kicker spells that we're running. Untamed Kavu and Kavu Titan, Kavu Primarch, Baloth Gorger. I mean, all of these can just turn into 5/5s for 5. And doubling them up can be really good, but they're still just barely playable in our format. Of course, we're going to get some advantage and we're going to synergize with these +1/+1 counters, but this is one area that you can customize your deck. You can cut these out, you can move up the curve to make it a little bit more aggressive, but actually to make these creatures really relevant, I think that we need to play with the +1/+1 counter synergies that are already there. Of course, Verazol has these +1/+1 counters as well, but we can hopefully just proliferate our entire team with cards like Evolution Sage. Every land drop can just be this huge pump to everyone. We can also start distributing +1/+1 counters, especially onto our commander. We have Evolutionary Escalation and Predatory Hunger. All of them can put multiple counters on Verazol every time we come around the board. And then finally, we have the new Inscription of Abundance. It's a great utility card with kicker, and for just 5 mana and copied, we get to put 4 more counters on Verazol, gain some life, fight 2 creatures, just amazing stuff. Next, we have a few more kicker payoffs. Roost of Drakes. I'm pretty sure that you've seen this be legit in limited, but it can hang in Commander 2, especially when we pack our deck full of kicker. And then we have Twinning Staff. This is a little bit of a hot take, but Twinning Staff is better than Doubling Season in our deck. We have this insanely expensive commander staple, and then we have Twinning Staff, where you're thinking, what commander deck did that come from? So Doubling Season actually gives us an interesting conundrum. So whenever we think we're putting a token onto the battlefield, we go, oh, Doubling Season gives us an extra token. But because this token is created on the stack, Doubling Season doesn't get to double that, which is a really interesting interaction. I urge you to read the rules for Verazol on websites. I'll have a link to Scryfall in the description down below. But it's super interesting that this token isn't just created, it's instead actually on the stack. So doubling Season Primal Vigor, they might have +1/+1 counter synergies, but let's look at a lower budget card like Twinning Staff and something like Strionic Resonator, something else that copies abilities. Those actually can create extra copies because it can copy something, an effect on a stack. It's crazy. It can also affect Kicker too. It's such a fun interaction that's definitely a little bit on the nerdy rules side of the equation. All right, this deck is super budget and super powerful and fun, but of course there's a few upgrades that are so kind of important. Rite of Replication, man, it's $5. I wish it wasn't. That's such a huge portion of this deck's budget, but it's so good. Just imagine copying Rite of Replication kicked. It's so many tokens. It can just take over a game. I think that it's worth breaking the bank for this card. Next, we have a new card, Thieving Skydiver. Right now, it's sitting at a couple dollars, and hopefully it can go up or down, but this is honestly just a great inclusion because stealing artifacts can be really good, like soul rings and lightning greaves and swiftfoot boots and all sorts of equipment and ramp all over the place. Just steal 2 things, get a dude onto the battlefield is so great. Next, we have another new card. It's Skyclave Relic. It's just barely out of this deck's budget at the time of release, but it's just a little bit expensive. Hopefully it will go down, but I love the idea of copying your Darksteel Ingot and being able to get so many copies of this silly card. It just feels amazing. And then Lithoform Engine. I really want to be able to double up all of our stuff, and actually Lithoform Engine is kind of a commander backup plan. You know, there aren't a lot of cards that do what our commander does, and Lithoform Engine is one of the only cards that can copy this kind of spell on the stack. And there's a lot of hype about it, so the price is all over the place. So hopefully it dips down out of your budget, you can trade for it and pick one up because it would be really fun. Forgotten Ancient. We have a few clunky ways to put +1/+1 counters on things, but Forgotten Ancient is a very efficient way to dump counters onto your commander so you can start doubling things over and over again. And then finally we have the Ozolith. What can it do? It can just store up all of these counters and make sure that you can rebuild so quickly with your commander post-board wipe, post-removal. I think that it's a great inclusion. By the way, upgrading this deck with all of these other cards and a couple extra lands and making everything great, we're not talking about like double or triple the budget. We're talking about like still around $50, which is so cheap. This deck is so much fun to build and play, and you can do it on a budget. So speaking about playing, let's talk about gameplay. This deck is defined by being good in the early game and late game because it's so flexible. In the early game, you can cast ramp or creatures depending upon what you need, and you don't have to kick anything. It's just, hey, let's just get things on the board or get lands onto the battlefield. And then whenever you need to, you can cast Verazol. Now, I think this is the point in time where people might take out your commander and you don't get that double up kicker value. And this is sort of the point in the game where you're a little bit nervous because you really want to be doubling up kicker spells. I think that this deck is really going to appeal to a lot of people because you can have the potential for really big plays, and that's how you can close out the game. Like for example, 2 hasty hexproof 10/10s out of nowhere. That's a huge swing that can win the game. Or something like Simic Ascendancy as a backup plan to just win out of nowhere. Also, this deck can be slowly upgraded for really inexpensive costs, but also it can be upgraded whenever Kicker is reintroduced because everyone loves Kicker. WotC will keep printing Kicker cards, and so your deck in future sets will just get better and better and cooler, which is something I really love about Magic. So I hope that you like this deck, and I definitely think that you should take a look at building it yourself. If you want to build this deck or get any other cards from Zendikar Rising, check out Cool Stuff Inc. They're the sponsor of the Jumbo Commander YouTube channel. If you use the coupon code JUMBO5, you'll get 5% off your order. And it's already so cheap to build this deck. I want to thank my patrons. I want to thank everyone, but I want to give a special shout out to Jevin, who helped me out with this deck tech. You can check out all of his stuff on EDHRec. They're a great resource and he posts some amazing articles there, so link in the description down below. Thank you so much for watching this video, and hopefully you guys are enjoying Zendikar Rising. I'll see y'all soon. Bye-bye.